Hey, folks, you're watching Inside the Numbers. We're going to get started real soon. All right, folks, thanks for watching Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. Got a lot of, well, not a lot, but a couple of video clips I want to play today. And then there's a couple of things that we missed on Monday's show about the presidential trend. If you are a member of Locals, which you should be, and if you're not, you should sign up right now, peoplespundit.locals.com. You would have already seen what I'm going to talk about, which is this difference between the trend in presidential vote preference from 2020 to now. And you know what? Even going all the way back to 2016, we were able to make some observations. And I'll share at least some of that that we discussed on Locals with the rest of you on the show today. But the bottom line is 2024 is not 2020. 2024 is not even 2016. And we are in completely uncharted territory here with these indictments, which we're also going to wrap into one. There is an indictment strategy. All right. The one in Georgia, however, I have to wonder, even though somebody like Jonathan Turley is like, this is the one that has legs. Okay. All right. You know, it's weird because some lawyers who are on the left who thought some of the other indictments had legs think this one is ridiculous. And so, I mean, that's the law, right? I mean, especially in modern America, the law is totally subjective, and it doesn't seem like anyone really understands the law anymore, just whatever the hell you want it to be. However, this is the one talking to, different lawyers that I've spoken with, is the one that carries a lot of risk for Democrats. And we're going to talk about why. But I think at the end of the day, the indictment strategy is it doesn't have one singular goal. I personally think that they would absolutely love to throw Donald Trump in jail if they could, because I think that this is about teaching you a lesson and teaching him a lesson that you don't, especially someone who is wealthy and, someone who's independently wealthy, who doesn't need special interests, who doesn't need rent seekers to fuel their candidacy and then later their subsequent tenure in the White House, especially in the White House. This is about telling them, don't you ever do this again. Because that person, whether they're on the left or the right, is an existential threat to the way the system currently works, which is a system of corrupt status quos, rent seeking, built upon the not even the principle, but the structure of seniority in a deeply corrupt town, right? And this is what happens to empires as they mature. Well, this one was supposed to be designed so this would not happen, but it did, because we tampered with a system that we did not understand. We tampered with a system that delegated power across all different elements of society, and we screwed it up. And not just society, but government, of course, different branches of government. And we touched it because we forgot what made it truly, and this is the saddest part about it. We forgot that is really what makes America exceptional, and the rule of law, and the simple fact that we resolve our differences at the ballot box. not in the juror box. We do not prosecute our political enemies unless they are truly guilty of something. And then even that, folks, in the past, high crimes and misdemeanors, very, very rarely it have been extraordinary circumstances in most cases, except for the stupid impeachment of Bill Clinton, which I don't know. You could argue. I tend to agree with what I see when I read, primary source documents from the founders. This is for a corrupt president. This is for a president who takes millions of dollars from foreign entities like China and Ukraine and Romania and other countries like that in order to sell U.S. foreign policy. And book club, we're just reading this, right? We just went over some of this on Sunday. We were talking about the argument that Henry and Madison were having, Patrick Henry and James Madison. And Madison said, look, we're going to be able to protect against foreign influence like this. But unfortunately, the defense that Madison goes on to wage is based upon a system that no longer exists. And then also all of this, which is getting to the root of what I'm talking about, all of this comes down to one very simple thing. It doesn't matter what you write on a piece of paper to preserve the rule of law. If you do not have, and I don't use the word educated as in like college, if you don't have an educated general populace and electorate, one that I'm not talking about, folks, they went to Yale, they went to Harvard. I'm talking about people who understand why the founders built the system they did and why it keeps us or preserves our liberty. People who understand that there is a never ending, unfortunately, like there is good and there is evil, like there is good deeds and then there are sin, right? And then there's sin. That's the way this government was built, to deal with that kind of a world. There is government and the never-ending quest for power. And then there is liberty. And the system is designed. Don't mess with it. Don't touch it, because it is designed to preserve liberty from those who are always after the power. And I'm going to play something that, you know what? Let's just blend both segments together, because I think they matter. I think we can. I think there's no way to talk about both of these things separately in an order like you would see on a television show on cable news. It can't be done. This is a discussion that we rarely have. Newt Gingrich, he got it. When I'm talking about the progression of power, okay, this never ending thing, once you give them a little bit, it was listen, people are bashing on Cernovich right now. I was going to grab a tweet. I'm just going to say, you're like dooming Cernovich, you're dooming. No, he's not. He's telling you where this is headed. He's being a realist. There are very clear steps to how this goes in history. We are not that special. Persecution for something like this is the fabrication of crimes. It's different than prosecution. You can be prosecuted for something that you truly did wrong. And if a president, like Grant, was a crook, folks, he may be the hero of the Civil War, but he's a friggin' crook and a drunk. If you're corrupt, like the Biden family is corrupt, like the Clintons are corrupt, like the Bushes are corrupt, like the McConnells are corrupt, then that's different. They're not above prosecution. But the twisting of statutes and pretzels in order to get them to fit so your political opponent is damaged, this is something totally different. That's Banana Republic stuff. And what Cerno's not doing, what he's telling you is the Banana Republic has been here. That's been here. We're in the persecution phase. The next phase is extermination. I'm not trying to, whoa, God, it is. All right, so this is what Newt is describing in his interview yesterday. All right, he is or not yesterday, it was 2 days ago maybe. But what he's explaining is the progression that we did not stop. It's our fault. And liberals, a lot of the fault lies with you, because when we got to Russia collusion, you didn't care what was true and what wasn't. And conservatives, a lot of the fault lies with you, because when on 9/11 we were attacked by terrorists, you decided it was just okay to give up your liberty to the police state. So no matter what you are, Republican, a Democrat, an independent, nothing, third party, whatever, we all bear this cross? Did you support the Department of Homeland Security? Did you think it was necessary for us to completely transform our way of life so we can be protected from terrorists? When was the last time we had a major terrorist attack? Why is the TSA still there? We went decades and decades and decades without it. Is the threat gone or not? Is it under control or not? If you ask most people, they'll and most of our so-called leaders, they'll tell you, yeah, well, then why is it there? Because that's how the Leviathan works. You give it to them in a moment of crisis, in a moment of fear, you never get it back. Robert Higgs, Crisis and Leviathan. Because once you give it to them, even if they cede back some of that power, the power will never recede to where it was before. The founders understood that. And what we have seen in the modern era is an acceleration, and that is what Newt is describing here.
That it is Barack Obama who corrupts the Justice Department. It is Hillary Clinton who routinely breaks the law and gets away with it. And now we have Joe Biden who's learned. He's learned from Obama that doesn't matter what you do, if you're a liberal Democrat, you will not be prosecuted. He learned from Hillary that a person in high public office can get millions and millions of dollars. And they learned from watching Donald Trump that a true outsider willing to take on the entire system could destroy their entire machine. So what you're seeing across the country is a desperate last-ditch effort by a corrupt machine to destroy their most dangerous opponent in a way which not only breaks the Constitution, destroys the rule of law, and establishes a moment of bitterness, which I think will last for a generation or more. I think this is going to be a horrendous period, and we just need to understand the people who want to control America and dictate to the rest of us will break any law, lie about any topic, and manipulate the system any way they can, and that includes a lot of the elite news media.
The media plays a very pivotal role every time this happens, no matter where it is. Talking about modern, even folks, even in before we got into the modern era of information, the media, whether it were pamphlets or it was newspapers, they always play a key role in this. They apologize for Stalin. They apologize for Mao. They hid Pol Pot. Okay, this is the way this always goes. They are not your friends. They're not objective. They're the enemy by the true Webster Merriam dictionary definition. They are the enemy, someone who seeks to oppose and or do harm. That is what they are. Now, I'm not saying that you go out and do anything of it. It's just you have to know that when you're consuming what they tell you. Do you remember, if you've been with me for a while, do you remember about 6 months ago, we ran a clip from a mentalist, and he did these amazing things, all he, to be able to predict what people would say in response to this, that, the other thing. He did it by looking through the media propaganda, and he determined what they were subliminally putting in your head. They have been for a long time getting you to surrender. And folks, you let them get away with Russia collusion. You let them get away with Crossfire Hurricane. And honestly, at this point, if you were to raise the founders from the dead, I'm not sure they would blame the Democratic Party. I think they would blame the Republican Party for doing nothing, for being idle, which they believe to be evil, in the face of evil deeds. They sit on their butts. They make campaign promises. They try to survive. And they don't understand that they're next to be lined up against the wall. Something Tim Pool said yesterday is absolutely true. And it even personally affects me. If you look through the Georgia indictment, they are now prosecuting, and the feds are doing it too. They are now prosecuting lawyers for doing their job. During the attempt to subvert Donald Trump, the seditious, and it is a seditious conspiracy, what they did to Donald Trump in destroying attorney-client privilege was a massive step toward tyranny. Massive. Do you know how much reverence was given to the very basic justice system that would be implemented in this country? These foundational principles: innocent until proven guilty. Everyone has the right to a solid, credible, and competent defense. Well, that can't be possible without attorney-client privilege. Now that they've done with lawyers and they're done with former presidents, they're going to start moving on to the rest of us really, really soon. They started moving on to 80-plus-year-old women who are alternate electors for Donald Trump in states like Michigan and Georgia, even though Democrats have been doing this for decades. Democrats have been appointing alternate electors for decades. It doesn't matter anymore. Democrats have decided raw power. They are going the way of tyranny. Raw power at all costs is the most important thing to them. That's their priority. They are the instrument in this balance between power and liberty. Well, Republicans are abdicating their duty to be the defenders of liberty. So I blame them. And I believe if you resurrected James Madison right now, a Federalist, he would blame Kevin McCarthy. He would blame all the Republicans who claim to be fighting and doing nothing. If Republicans wanted to, those corrupt shills pretending to be Republicans in Georgia could end Fani Willis's effort right now. If Democrats had a 9-seat majority in the House of Representatives, they would stop the government in its tracks until Jack Smith was defunded. Period. End of story. At the end of the day, when I say that the Democrats are playing raw power politics, we still do have one body in this country that could rectify this raw power grab. The problem is it probably wouldn't be done until it was they already succeeded in turning elections into selections. It doesn't matter if Donald Trump is vindicated later, as long as they stop him right now. They've already interfered in like 4 of the last 4 election cycles, to include midterms. They've already used the power of the administrative state and its alliance with a very deeply corrupted media to influence the elections. Now they're at the point, you know what, it's getting a little bit cumbersome of me to influence. I think we should probably just drop the pretenses and get to the selection, because the chilling effect that's going to happen here is that no good person is ever going to run for president again. They are not going to do it. It comes now at a cost of being prosecuted and thrown in jail. Folks, people know this. They loved Donald Trump. They loved him before he chose to essentially, how could I put this? Before he chose to essentially, I don't want to say condemn. It's not condemn. What he did was forsake the system that is designed for him in order to defend people he thought did not have a voice. That's what he did. Jack Posobiec put this up the other day. It's a flashback. Anyone who lived in this area at the time of the attack remembers the role that people like Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump played during the 9/11 terror attacks. Even people who were once dubbed America's mayor and someone, by the way, Trump was called by many the savior of New York City because everybody was fleeing. They were afraid. And Donald Trump did everything in his power to keep business alive. So to be an example, do not leave Manhattan. Do not leave the 5 boroughs. Do not let them win. America's mayor became America's mayor because of his reputation for prosecuting the commission, La Cosa Nostra. He proved once and for all, as an Italian American, there is in fact an American mafia, and we can prosecute them. And how do you do it? RICO. RICO is a complicated law, but you basically have to prove that, or you can't, this is the tool that's so powerful against the commission, because you have bosses of 5 families. Every time you took a little spoke out of the wheel kept on moving. You needed to smash the wheel. And in the case of the mafia, the wheel was the commission. It was the 5 families. So reading Joe Bonanno's book, once America's Godfather, the head of the Bonanno crime family, Rudy Giuliani, it dawns on him. What Joe Bonanno is describing is a RICO case. These are corrupt companies. They, in fact, run like corporations. And they have heads. And there's a governing committee above all of those corporations. We can charge them as in a RICO violation. Widely praised. Becomes mayor, an extremely popular mayor of one of the most liberal cities in the country. And yet he's named in the indictment in Georgia for being an attorney to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, by the way, is being indicted. Several of these counts have to do with like tweets. He sent out tweets saying, watch One America News Network because they're talking about potential fraud in Georgia. Boom. I mean, they have now twisted, as Rudy Giuliani was indicted. The moment the indictment came down, I'm not talking about when they accidentally fake leaked it. National Geographic was actually running a special which praised Rudy Giuliani. Michael Chertoff is on it. They're interviewing Michael Chertoff. I kid you not, folks. They got Joe Pistone in there, the undercover FBI agent playing Donnie Brasco. As the indictment comes down, that was on television. So that's how far someone can come when a system chooses to just become totally corrupt. You can change someone's reputation just like that. Donald Trump is being indicted by Alvin Bragg in a city that he did this for. All right? This is just, to me, absolutely incredible. Let's watch this flashback. Flashback time. Okay? Come on. I might have to redo it. Yeah. Let's redo it. Come on. It's going to load up. I'll make it big again. I should have downloaded. I just didn't want to. It was like the last thing I wanted to know.
To say.
Well, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen two huge 110-story buildings that are reduced to rubble, thousands and thousands of lives. I just got to see something that I've never seen before. I have hundreds of men inside working right now, and we're bringing down another 125 in a little while, and they've never done work.
Come on. Well, you get the point. He's got people from his business down there helping out. It was totally dangerous to even be there at that time. Then it gets worse for those who weren't there. Maybe you don't know. He's walking up and down telling the restaurants, don't close. Media's got their cameras out. Come out. Go to the restaurants in New York City. Do not be afraid. Indicted by a city that would look like total shit without him. It's true. Let's get real. It's absolutely true. Over what? A hush payment, hush money that really, honestly, is in. It doesn't even look like it happened. If you read the damn documents and emails back and forth and look at the supposed victim, look at her own statements. If you look at the totality of it, it looks like Donald Trump's the victim. He got extorted by a porn star who basically said, I'm a porn actress and I'm going to extort you, a rich guy in the limelight, if you don't give me money. Now that you're running for president, I think I'll do that. He should have left that ice skating rink to melt and collapse. He should have taken his company after 9/11 and said, you know what? This is because our leaders are so stupid, they couldn't even protect us. I'm out of here. But he didn't because he loves New York City. Moment about this in Georgia indictment again. I want to talk real quick about Jenna Ellis, which I will not mock with her name. Jenna Ellis was an attorney for Donald Trump at that time. She is named in that indictment. Had Robert Barnes not looked at the shit show that was the Georgia case. I mean, in the beginning, the Georgia case that was put together was one of the strongest cases to contest the election that was ever crafted. And Robert Barnes, and you had Patrick and Cleta Mitchell and others, they were down there doing what really was incredible work. However, once the Sidney Powell started to roll in, And I've told you guys, if you've been with me for a long time, I was consulted on some of this stuff. The minute I saw some of the crazy email threads, I just said, I'm out. I'm done. I'm sorry. This is crazy. The votes are not going overseas and coming back. That's not what this is about. Robert and I were very clear that it is valid to ask to look at the signatures. If they don't show you the signatures, you will know why. Which is part of the second segment, by the way. Fani, you stepped on Jack Smith's toes, and you may have opened a door that all of you Democrats are going to wish had stayed closed. Because if this goes forward, Donald Trump's going to be able to defend himself. On Monday, he's already announced that at 11 a.m., he will hold a big press conference. It's going to be a big press conference. I already know. With a very thorough or very, I'm not sure if thorough is the word. Listen, he's fighting in the court of public opinion. So he's not going to go over a statistic review in front of you. But he will put forward evidence to defend himself, because at the end of the day, he was never allowed to litigate whether or not there were anomalies and or fraud in Georgia. He was not allowed to do it, despite things like this. And Matt was not alone.
In this election, who filed national change of address cards in Georgia, moving themselves to another state. And I can also show you the subsequent state voter registrations of these individuals in other states who then cast earlier absentee ballots back in Georgia. I can show you the names of the people and the records of them having voted in multiple states in the raw data that the states make available. So this isn't speculative.
It's not speculation, which is where he was going with it. People who have access to voter files, like we do, this is not a difficult task. For me, the bottom line came down to whether or not they would allow us to look at the signatures, or they would allow us to look, like they promised, at the scanned images of ballots. Because it went awry, people like Robert Barnes, who was called by the president directly, he left. Had he not, he would have been in that indictment. People like Jenna Ellis, who really did not know anything about elections. Here's the truth. A bunch of people came in to defend Donald Trump who didn't really know about the elections. And not that Rudy Giuliani deserves an indictment for it, but the idea, the strategy that was in that case that unfortunately was never heard. I think the country and the state would have benefited from allowing that case to go forward, because now, we've polled Georgia ourselves. I'll show it to you in a little bit. Georgia believes that the state went for Donald Trump. Even 35% of Democrats say, yeah, I don't think Joe Biden won the state legitimately. I think people, and this is how we phrased it, did not correctly match signatures. They counted mismatched signatures, and they just don't care. Democrats don't care. And Jenna Ellis and others who really don't know anything about election laws or processes. Yeah, she's a lawyer, but she is not an election law expert. On the right, the closest one to that is like Cleta Mitchell and Robert Barnes. They don't have a Mark Elias, right? And they have all these other people who come in and want to get famous, which is what Jenna Ellis wanted to do. She was a nobody who tried nothing. She's not a real lawyer, like a practicing lawyer like that. And she came in, because she wanted the fanfare and the limelight. She hated Trump in 2016. We don't have to go root through her Facebook posts. You could either do it yourself or take my word for it, but they're all there. She pulled I'm a Christian card, and I'm such a good Christian, I can't in good conscience support somebody who's an egomaniac like Donald Trump. Like, that's who she was back in 2016. So she took this opportunity to make money and become famous. Then when the fire got hot, or the frying pan got hot, she jumped out ASAP and made a deal to keep her license after the Colorado State Bar Association threatened to take it. Personally, there's a fight going on right now, and I have my own personal thing to say about this. There's a fight going on right now. They're all the Simps are on Twitter bitching. John Cardildo and others are bitching that Donald Trump is not paying Jenna's legal bills. He is, however, paying a lot of legal bills of people who have stayed loyal to him. But the minute there was some trouble, she cut a deal and ran. Made a deal to do this, to turn on him. Many people know about this, and it's never discussed on social media or elsewhere. He has personally lied about me and my own history of being persecuted. I know what it's like to have the government come after you, folks. I know what it's like for them to charge you and try to squeeze you to get information. The first sign of trouble she did, that was it. Why would you pay the legal bills? Now, that being said, the indictment is BS, and Jenna Ellis should not be indicted. This is listen, just because, she jumps back and forth and isn't a trustworthy person, doesn't mean she should be caught up in an indictment. This is crazy. She was doing her job. That being said, why would Donald Trump pay the legal bills of somebody who is likely to flip on him the first chance she gets? Why? He's going to pay her legal bills so her lawyer can negotiate a plea deal with Fani Willis for her to testify against Donald Trump. Somebody who is known to talk out of both sides of her mouth. I don't think so. I don't think so. I wouldn't, would you? Let me just ask you that. Even if you're a DeSantis supporter, a Tim Scott supporter, a Nikki Haley supporter, be intellectually honest with yourself for a second. Is he abandoning her, or is he just doing what you would do? Would you pay the legal bills of somebody who is going to flip and think on you in a heartbeat? Because that's what she's going to do. Without a doubt, that is what she's going to do. All right. I'm going to play this Dersh thing again because I think it's important this is from War Room from yesterday. And by the way, media takes this like, Alan Dershowitz said this. They failed to hit the headline. And the headline is this. Well, let him speak.
There'll be some convictions. I think the strategy is to get bad convictions, but to get them fast in New York, in Florida, in Washington, and in Fulton County. Then they'll be reversed on appeal, but they'll be reversed on appeal after the election. That's why everybody's rushing to get these cases tried. We now know that they want it tried within 6 months in Georgia. They want a trial in January in Washington, D.C. They want a trial in May in Florida. New York has been willing to put it off, but they're going to get on the bandwagon too. Everybody who is going after Trump, the whole get Trump approach is to get him before the election, convict him before the election. Then he wins on appeal. All right, that's tomorrow's news.
That's exactly right. That's tomorrow's news. So if you can hurt him in the polls, right? I mean, think about it. There are multiple outcomes to this that could satisfy people who don't want Donald Trump to be president again. One is Republicans, the cowards that they are, the crooks, the cowards, and the stupid people that they are, will pull together in a fear. They're afraid, to get, basically in alignment with what will be roughly 9 blue state governors arguing that he's not eligible to be on their ballot. And they'll say, we can't have this. We can't risk it. If he's removed from the ballot by these Democratic governors, we're sure to lose. I mean, you could hear it now, folks. David Giglio on Twitter is 100% correct. Many of them want this to happen. They don't care about the long-term impacts. They're just like the Democrats, and they're thinking that the ends justify the means, and it doesn't really matter what damage you're going to do moving forward. It just doesn't. So at the, if you're them, any one of these outcomes could work. That's one of them. Another one is you potentially damage them in the polls. That's conventional wisdom. Somebody who's facing all these indictments is going to be hurt by it. I tend to agree with Barnes on something. Americans love an underdog, and they don't like being told what to do. Martin Luther King was one of the most unpopular people in the country. You may not realize this. Gallup used to ask it a different way. They used to do a numbering system in order to determine someone's favorable and unfavorable ratings. And since then, they've changed over to how everyone else asks about favorability, and they've used that Likert scale, essentially a numbered Likert scale, to translate into what is favorable, unfavorable would have been. Martin Luther King was more unfavorable at the height of his movement than Donald Trump was during the most unpopular point in his tenure as president, until the government went after him. Until they started to prosecute and beat him and try to put his allies in jail. until Hoover tried to blackmail them. They like underdogs. They don't like seeing it visually. And they're going to see these trials visually, at least some of them. It would be glamorous for Donald Trump to have this trial in Georgia televised. It would be ideal for him. And as Barnes said, what's the most popular picture of Martin Luther King? It's not his I Have a Dream speech. It's his mugshot. That was the most influential picture. Maybe all these years later, decades later, you think of Martin Luther King, you think about him on the steps. I have a dream. But that's not what people back then thought. When they thought of Martin Luther King, they thought of that mugshot. And they thought, man, this guy is just trying to fight to defend some people. And nobody deserves to be treated like this. I don't like it. It's a little guy story. It's a David and Goliath story. And Americans don't like to root for Goliath, ever. When have they? Can you think of a single example? I can't. Not one comparable to this. Speaking of comparable, Dan McLaughlin writes this article. It's published in the New York Post. He's a National Review, never Trumper. It's in the Washington Post, and he's talking about all these like obscure examples of candidates who were being charged with crimes, running and losing. And, candidates who are under indictment don't make good candidates. And I'm just laughing to myself because, of course, that's not at all what we're seeing right now. Nothing on the historical record is comparable to what we're seeing right now. And in fact, if you do try to find comparable examples, there's really none in the United States, but around the world, there certainly is. Nelson Mandela made a hell of a good candidate. Netanyahu, who didn't get thrown in prison, but they would have if he did. He's just this guy. It's like, really, whether you like Benjamin Netanyahu or not, you got to give this guy credit where credit is due. He's incredible. He made a great candidate. This guy, which I've played before and I'm going to play it again, he made a good candidate.
Está declarando el presidente Trump.
President Trump has declared.
Expresidente Trump. Que lo van a detener.
Ex-President Trump has declared that he will be arrested.
Creo que hoy.
I believe today.
Por un asunto.
Because of an issue.
Supuestamente, como dicen
supposedly,
presuntamente,
or as lawyers would say, allegedly,
sí, amoroso,
things of love.
Que lo van a detener.
They want to arrest him.
Si fuese así,
if that is the case,
pues todo mundo sabría.
Then the whole world would know.
Porque no nos estamos chupando el dedo.
Because we're not sucking on our thumbs over here.
Que es para que no aparezca en la boleta.
That the real reason they want to arrest him is to remove him from the ballot.
Y si digo esto es porque yo padecí de la fabricación de un delito.
And I say this because I too was a victim of a fabricated crime because they didn't want me to be the candidate.
Y eso es completamente antidemocrático.
And that is completely anti-democratic.
Porque no se le permite al pueblo que sea el que decida.
Because they're not allowing the people to be the ones who decide.
I'll play that clip a dozen times in the next couple of months if I have to. Because it really doesn't matter, to some degree, it really doesn't matter what some partisan liberal thinks, or what some jealous DeSantis supporter thinks, or what some jealous governor from Florida who wants to be president instead thinks. This is not just damage that will be done to our constitutional system here at home. It won't just be a massive shift in that tug of war between tyranny and liberty, with tyranny pulling liberty way over. It won't be what is essentially the end, which Dan McLaughlin refuses to even tackle in his article. The end of you selecting the candidate that you want, or the end of independent, truly independent people who don't rely on rent seekers putting themselves forward for positions of leadership for the good of the people. It won't just be the end of that. It'll be the end, the total end of whatever little credibility we have left in the international system as the so-called beacon of democracy and self-governance. Everyone else knows the New York Times is lying to you. Everyone else knows the Washington Post is lying to you. Everyone else knows Fani Willis is lying to you. Everyone else around the world knows Alvin Bragg is lying to you. Everyone else knows Jack Smith is corrupt. Everyone else knows Joe Biden and his family are corrupt. You look like a stooge. And to some extent, because you are. Everyone knows Jack Kemp is lying to you. Here's Jack Kemp. It's just unbelievable. Brian Kemp, excuse me. I confused the two because I associate both of them with fake Reaganites. Trump says a large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud which took place in Georgia is almost complete and will be presented by me at a major news conference at 11 a.m. on Monday next week in Bedminster, New Jersey. Based on the results of this conclusive report, all charges should be dropped against me and others. And there you go, Jenna. There he is. He's talking about you two. There will be complete exoneration. They never went after those that rigged the election. They only went after those who fought to find the riggers. The glaring hypocrisy in the case of Georgia is Stacey Abrams, of course. Donald Trump lost by a few thousand votes out of millions of votes. Some of it I'm going to show you in a second. Stacey Abrams lost by tens and tens and tens of thousands of votes. Her turnout rate in the Atlanta metro area compared to the rest of the state was higher. And her turnout among African Americans was historic for a midterm election. There is absolutely no evidence that Stacey Abrams was robbed, and her accusation about Brian Kemp purging the voter rolls is not only a lie, but it is meant to prey on the ignorance of people who don't understand how voter rolls are maintained and elections are conducted and prosecuted in this country and in the state of Georgia. Supervisors of elections in regional areas are responsible for maintaining the voter rolls. The Secretary of State is responsible for them enforcing it. But if she should have been mad at anybody, it should be her own liberal friends in the Atlanta metro area who work for the supervisor of elections. Kemp says in response to this, the 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen. For nearly 3 years now, anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law. This is such a lie. This is a falsehood, but he knows it, and that makes it a lie. Our elections in Georgia are secure, accessible, lie, and fair, and will continue to be as long as I am governor. The future of our country is at stake in 2024, and that must be our focus. Well, that's exactly right, Brian. And this goes to what David Giglio and I have told you for a long time. Brian Kemp doesn't care about the fraud in Georgia because it helps him. They think that they're exempt. And in 2022, some of them got a bit of a wake-up call, but they think they're exempt from it. Here's the truth, which Robert Barnes, who was there and knows, said. Kemp lies. Trump's Georgia election contest was, by law, required to be heard within 10 days. Fulton County courts refused. They just refused. Hence, Trump's election contest was never heard. Georgia also promised to produce signature matches and publish ballots, but reneged and did neither. That's exactly right. In truth, they gave some to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who they perceived to be a friend, an ally in this narrative war, because that's what media is. And as goes back to the beginning of the show, what I told you, the media is always the enemy of liberty. They are never the friend of liberty. Never. Not in any context. They hid famines in Ukraine. They hid mass executions in Russia. They hid mass executions in China. They hid Cambodia. They hid Rwanda until it just couldn't be ignored anymore. In fact, in many cases, you could go back and find institutions like the New York Times doing puff pieces about these dictators. You know, in communist China, the West always complains about freedom, but Russian women have toe-curling orgasms. That was a headline from the New York Times. While Stalin was killed, after Stalin killed millions of people. Ignore the genocide. Get a toe-curling orgasm by a Russian man. That was a headline of the New York Times, Laura. Don't blame me. She's like, did you just really say toe-curling orgasm? That is the headline of the New York Times. The truth is, Kemp is a liar. None of that was ever heard. And somebody, Kyle Becker, actually, let me give him a hat tip, had sent this out last night and was like, remember this flashback from Tucker, before he got thrown off the air? It was months after the election. And Vote Georgia had sued to get these documents that Georgia was refusing to let. Because, by the way, the Kemp administration, Brad Raffensperger, whose right-hand man's own ballot was fraudulently taken, refused to give what they promised to give. And I could play the whole thing. It's 6 minutes. I'm not going to. I just wanted to pick one screenshot, which I think details it all. There's so much. There's what Matt Brainerd was talking about with the change of address flags, which is something that Barnes and I both chose to focus on ourselves. And then there's just stupid stuff like this. Duplicate ballots and the slips that don't match. When Voter Georgia counted this particular batch, they found there were duplicate ballots counted. Thousands of them, about 4,000 of them, they were able to find in their investigation of Fulton County, Georgia. They weren't looking through everything. That's what they found. That netted Joe Biden almost 3,300 votes. Let's recall how many votes Joe Biden won Georgia by. Right. Here's one of those duplicate ballots that they counted and was in fact tagged with the wrong numbers. Oh, and by the way, when they went actually to go back and look at the slips and compare the vote tallies on the slips to what the actual ballot said, there was like one batch was like 800 to 0 for Joe Biden. It was 800 for Joe Biden, 0 for Donald Trump, 0 for Joe Jorgensen. When they looked at it, it was like, I'd have to go back and look and make sure I'm saying this right, but it was more like 500 and something for Joe Biden, 3 for Joe Jorgensen, and the rest for Donald Trump. So here is a ballot from Fulton County, Georgia. This is somebody who appears to be writing in Republican for some of the down ballot races. So you would have to think the rest of them are Republican votes. They left a lot of stuff blank on referendums. They left the statewide referendum, which you can't see, it's cut off. They left that blank, though, because I've seen this ballot before. All right. And if you look up, this is a vote for Joe Biden, even though they're writing in Republican everywhere else. And look at the top there, folks. Do you see the top left bubble? These are ballots that are side by side. All right. So it's not 4 columns. There are 2 columns, and they are side by side because they're 2 different ballots. That column in the middle that's blank, that is the separation between the 2 ballots. Look at the race for district attorney. It's at the top left. Look at the tiny little dot in that Scantron bubble. It's almost like someone just put a little mark there. You know who that is? Fani Willis. I kid you not. So here is a ballot that supposedly leaves a whole bunch of state referendums completely empty. They're completely identical. In every single one where there is a Democrat but running unopposed because there is no Republican, this voter supposedly writes in Republican, yet puts a dot by Fani Willis and then writes in Republican anyway. Counted for Fani Willis, counted twice. It's clearly the same ballot. Does the handwriting look similar to you? If you watch the segment on Tucker, you will see that it is very, very clearly the same damn ballot. So let's go back and let's look at, should I do this? I feel like I really should. What is it? 12:51. All right. I am going to play it just so you guys don't think, first of all, because I already know that, where people are going to come at for this. I'm going to play some of it. I'm not going to play it all. I'll play his monologue part of it. And then just this way, everyone understands that that this is 100%. I'm not blowing smoke. This absolutely happened. And regardless of what Brian Kemp tells you, this never was resolved. This was never answered. Donald Trump never got his day in court over this. Here's Tucker before he was obviously removed from Fox News. Let's go.
It now appears there actually was meaningful voter fraud in Fulton County, Georgia last November. That is not a conspiracy theory. It's true. From the beginning, this show has tried to be fact-based when we talk about the 2020 election results. So here's what we know tonight, factually. At least 36 batches of mail-in ballots from the November election were double counted in Fulton County. That's a total of more than 4,000 votes. Those numbers come from a group called Voter GA, which along with Bob Cheeley sued to get them. The final tally from the double counts we know about amounts to more than 3,300 votes for Joe Biden and 865 votes for Donald Trump. Now, before you dismiss Bob Cheeley and Voter GA as dishonest partisan actors, keep in mind that the strongly left of center Atlanta Journal-Constitution appears to agree with this, at least in outline. The newspaper reviewed the available digital.
I just want to say, though, they reneged because they realized they were just like, oh, no, this isn't, they were afraid that ultimately, if some case was ultimately heard and that they would get all these scans, that obviously they would show a lot more. So if you were to contact them today, they would have a different story.
Ballot images independently and concluded that hundreds of ballots were improperly duplicated. What does that look like exactly? Well, here's what it looks like. At a press conference yesterday, a consultant with Voter GA called David Cross showed how we can be certain that votes in Fulton County were counted more than once. Watch.
What I'm going to show you here is two ballots side by side. One of them is marked for Jason Shaw, and it's got a little squiggle mark next to it. You can see it's got the identical mark on the second one. And the ballot image is stored up here on the top left. So this one over here is scanner 5162. That's scanner number 3. Batch number 235. Image number 19. And that matches 234, image 59. So you have the same ballot counted twice.
And I just want to note, you may note that a lot of these down ticket are votes for Republicans. Not for Donald Trump, but votes for Republicans. So I'm going to play you something after because I really want to drive home the point that I am making, again, which I see David making on Twitter every day. The establishment in the Republican Party doesn't care about this because they want to do it too. They just want to use it against Trump.
In the images and counted in the audit. How that's possible, I don't know.
How's that possible? I don't know.
And can we agree that's the same ballot? Can we all just agree that is the same ballot? Correct? Right.
Every American should want to know because the answer gets to the heart of the integrity of our elections, otherwise known as our democracy. We're not talking about a couple of ballots here. We're talking about a lot of ballots, at least hundreds of ballots involved, enough potentially to affect the outcome of the election. Here's another example.
Here's one of the next ones. All right, so same batch, number 234, image number 2, and 235, image number 61.
This is the ballot. Okay, and here's where you see these little things writing in. You see a little dot by Fani Willis. Okay, I mean, who the hell would do that? Let's get real.
Republican, all the way down to the point where this little
and just think about under and over votes when we're looking at these.
spot up in Fani Willis matches this one over here. So question that ballot was counted twice.
So what's the explanation for this? Well, if you ask Fulton County, these discrepancies, the ones you just saw on the screen, were isolated incidents, just a handful of bad ballots happened.
I just want to let it go for a little while longer, just so you can hear that actual tally that I referred to before.
Happens all the time. The county claims that any errors were caught in previous recounts. The problem is that neither one of those claims is true. Surveillance footage obtained by Voter GA appears to show large numbers of ballots being scanned multiple times. Pay attention in the tape we're showing you to the woman wearing yellow at the desk. According to Voter GA, she slides ballots into a scanning machine, removes the ballots, and then reinserts the same ballots. This happens multiple times. The question is, how many times were those ballots counted? Was each vote counted more than once? Fulton County won't answer that question. Now, one way to know the answer would be to check what are called audit tally sheets. Tellingly, for months after the presidential election, Fulton County failed to provide more than 100,000 of those tally sheets, including 50,000 of them for mail-in ballots. When Voter GA finally forced Fulton County to turn over the tally sheets, the conclusion was stunning. Here's what the audit found. Quote, 7 falsified audit tally sheets containing fabricated vote totals. For example, a batch containing 59 actual ballot images for Joe Biden and 42 for Donald Trump was reported as 100 for Biden and 0 for Trump. The 7 batches of ballot images with 554 votes for Joe Biden, 140 votes for Donald Trump, and 11 votes for Joe Jorgensen had tally sheets in the audit falsified to show 850 votes for Biden, 0 votes for Trump, and 0 votes for Jorgensen. Wait, did you just follow that?
Sure did. Now, if you do that, this is just Fulton County. Okay, Gwinnett County's normal rejection rate is about 12.5% in absentee ballots. They rejected about 0 point something, some ridiculous number in 2020. Fulton County usually rejects about 7%. They rejected almost nothing. So you have these multiple layers of things on top of each other. If you're doing this a little bit, right, the woman in the yellow shirt, a little bit here, a little bit there, Fulton County does it, Gwinnett County, Get the Cab does it. Hell, all over the place. Don't just think about liberal areas here. If you are I don't know, let's say Republican rhino supervisor of election outside of, Savannah, for instance, let's just say that. Okay. Now you may say you're a Republican, you may claim to support Donald Trump, but at the end of the day, you're not really supporting Donald Trump. Think what we talked about in Kent County, Michigan, for instance, supposedly a Republican recorder. Everyone else seemed to perform at normal levels. And then we had these like crazy disparities. And they'll just tell you that's because these suburban women, they vote for Doug Collins, but they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. And that's why there's this like exaggerated disparity between these candidates. Okay.
This feels different. You know what Donald Trump did his most damage in Georgia. He sucked the soul out of the Republican Party here. He sucked the morality out of the Republican Party, the fiscal responsibility out of the Republican Party. He sucked our winning percentage out of the Republican Party. He's taken everything from us, and it is our turn to take it back, right? It's our turn to win elections based on the policies that we think we're better on. This is the prime spot for us to take Joe Biden to the woodshed and call him out for not running the border right, not protecting our communities, not putting our best foot forward internationally. These are our moments in time. But if we make this about the 3-ring circus of Donald Trump, we will lose, and lose again.
You make a good point that.
Okay. Did you hear that? Loud and clear. And first of all, on Monday, did we not go over this? What he just said, he's taking our winning margins. Is that true? No, it's not true. And then you want to cite the example of Brian Kemp. Hell, our final poll had Brian Kemp up by 7. About 30% of the Republican Party who does not like him said they were voting for Brian Kemp. That is because they need Trump's vote. And because maybe at the top of that ticket, certain ballots are counted more than they should be. But here's still, even with all of that, here is still the at the end of the day, Republicans, regardless whether they're Donald Trump or not, have been falling in these areas. Could you imagine, like, so here what we're seeing here is that David Perdue did worse than Donald Trump in the Atlanta metro area. And I was actually wrong when I looked at Fulton County on Monday. Remember, I had to go back and look at it again. Donald Trump actually got, even with all of this, even with what it appears has happened, Donald Trump still got 26% in highly African-American Fulton County. 26%. David Perdue, low teens and then single digits. Walker, high teens, then single digits. David Perdue and Herschel Walker both. One total rhino, the other one, oh, by the way, a total rhino who, along with Mitch McConnell and the rest of his family, the Perdue family, were arguing was going to sail to re-election in the runoff without Donald Trump on the ballot. Like you just heard that idiot, the former lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan, argue in that CNN clip, on CNN, no less, folks, on CNN. You just heard this moron, this tiny-brained little man, Jeff Duncan, the woodshed, by the way. That's how you know you're talking to a rhino Southern Republican. They'll use phrases like that. It's simply not even true. They thought he's one of them. They thought Perdue's going to cruise to victory. Kelly Ossoff, Kelly, who cares what her name is? Kelly's in trouble a little bit against Warnock, but at the end of the day, we think she's going to squeeze it out. But Perdue, he's going to win by like 3-5. That's what they believed. They believed Donald Trump hurt him. Well, Perdue edges ahead a little bit, just under 50 on election day, or no, that's not true. A week later, because he was above 50 before before what happened. Perdue was above 50. And then over time, as they're trying to hand Georgia to Joe Biden, which, by the way, Brad Raffensperger's right-hand man, who is a total piece of, boasted on Facebook that it would be like a great honor to him if they could make sure Georgia did not go to Donald Trump. I mean, folks, think about how they're charging Donald Trump for tweets that say, watch One America News. But people like Shelby aren't being charged with anything that appears to be, even though he blatantly is describing his intent on Facebook to use the office he holds to do whatever he can to deny Donald Trump taking the state of Georgia. He can't win without Georgia. Wouldn't it be great if we could stop Trump in Georgia? What does that mean? I think we all know what it means. And for their efforts, look how well Raffensperger did in the Atlanta metro area. Now, I'm willing to believe that there are Democrats who would vote for Brad Raffensperger because he was so anti-Trump. But you would absolutely have to hold the vast majority of your base in order to do that. Against Jody Heiss? I don't think so. So they may have opened a door here that they sure as hell could wish that they kept shut. Right, Laura. Exactly. Let's take a real quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the trend the presidential trend and why it matters. There are a slew of other polls that have come out. YouGov, by the way, we're just about ready in our transition, so we will be polling very soon. And I am so stoked about this transition. It's right, Laura. I am like a kid in a candy store. And by the way, never mind. I'm just going to leave it. Well, I need to do a show about, I don't know, the secrets of online panels or something. So I can let you in on a little secret when you see all these pollsters like Morning Consult has Trump at like 60, right? And then you have YouGov who's got him like still, they're like still trying to keep DeSantis at like 18 or 16%, right? But it was Trump plus 4 or 5 last month before these latest rounds of indictments. Biden plus 4 or 5 last month. It's now Biden plus 1, right? So are these indictments going to hurt this guy? I mean, really? So the indictment strategy, that's why I say they will throw him in jail. And I know I'm jumping ahead here, but they will throw him in jail if they can, even if it will be overturned later, because they need to make a maximum impact. And they'll do whatever they have to do, because at this point, again, tyranny and liberty, it is a constant struggle and an inverse relationship, constant struggle, pulling at each other. Who's going to win? Tyranny's on the march. It's on the march. It's been on the march. And because we sat with our thumbs up our you-know-whats, sadly, it's got an advantage now. And that's the truth. All right, let's take a quick break. Is your family prepared for a blackout? Listen, folks, our government is completely corrupt, but it's also incompetent. And authorities do worry about things like attacks. And also, we have weather events. If just 9 key substations were to go down, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. That's not even talking about various regions you may be in. That's why Laura and I are prepared, and that's why you need to be prepared with the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. New. It's portable. First of all, it's solar. It's portable, but it's still powerful enough to power your phones. Maybe you have family members, or you have medical devices, even your refrigerator. And you can get one right now. If you go to 4patriots.com and use the promo code on the screen right there, TPP10, you can get one right now for 10% off. This code is for your first purchase only. Of course, it does work for other things, but make it count. They have a great deal too right now, as seen on Fox. They have a great deal right now, and you can still use that promo code with the deal that they have. So make it count. Again, it's 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. And real quick, so we can just roll through the rest of them, I'm going to tell you about a great deal from our friends at Jam & Bean. This is a Patriot-owned. They're also extremely talented. They were COVID Patriots, Michigan-based, all-American right here. If you sign up for a new subscription, whether it's K-Cups or freshly brewed coffee, one of their great blends, or gourmet popcorn, which you know I love. I have this fixation for Jam & Bean, gourmet, and all natural popcorn, whatever it is. If you start a new subscription today, use the promo code on the screen, TPP40. That'll get you 40% off your initial subscription, right? 40% off. That's nothing for the 10%, right? Use my code, not the one that just popped up on the screen. You'll get 40% off. And yet, for that was up on the screen, you'll still get 10% off every month when your subscription renews. Of course, send us your feedback. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear about it. It's nothing but good things from people who have subscribed to Jam & Bean. I also just want to tell you real quick, they really are the only ones with a full-bodied medium roast K-Cup. If you're like me, you really do prefer to get coffee fresh that has been roasted by an artist that you can grind and sit and do right on your own, but sometimes you just don't have time. So I also use K-Cups. In the middle of the day, I prefer dark roast, but in the middle of the day and later on in the evening, I want a medium roast, but I don't like light weak. I don't like Bud Light. I don't like light beer. I don't like light coffee. If I'm going to have a medium roast because it's later in the day, I want a strong, full-bodied medium roast. There's a whole science behind it. If you go to the grocery store and you get a medium roast, it's really not a true medium roast. And by the way, there probably is some disgusting styrofoam filler in there that give you God knows what when you run that hot water through your Keurig or whatever to brew it up. They have worked it out. They have put the R&D into it, and I was thoroughly blown away. It is a delicious medium, but yet full-bodied K-cup. All right. So again, one more time, jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. All right, let's get back to it. Again, see so much on Twitter and on social media in general that is just simply false. It's just totally false. Polling misinformation, people commenting on polls that they don't really understand. Listen, primary polling at this point and even before is highly, highly predictive. It is almost a 100% certainty that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee. He is polling too far ahead of RFK, and they rigged the system in Biden's favor. It is almost a 100% certainty. It really is, if you consider just the empirical record, that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. There is nobody who is coming back from a deficit this large, and Ron DeSantis is headed in the wrong direction. Just today, he fell to a new low on the Real Clear Politics average. He is about to go into territory where they are in 5-turd fake, which has him a little bit lower. DeSantis is about to fall below 14%. A brand new poll right out from RMG Research, which I believe Scott Rasmussen filled in for what's his name who went over to DeSantis. That has DeSantis in 3rd place today. New national poll, very, very small sample size, to be honest. To be really clear, you know me, I don't like small samples. I don't. But that's their methodology. Even IBD tip had DeSantis fall to an all-time low this week. Well, it was released this week. It was conducted last week. He said it in the wrong direction. Primary polling is highly, highly predictive. The next is endorsements. All right. Even in 2016, Trump eventually, he did. The endorsements started to line up with the polling. This time it's both, and it's early and it's dominant. It's not even close. Look at what happened with New Hampshire the other day. They keep going on and on about these state endorsements, these state officials and these local officials. And I have been telling you that means almost nothing. I'm not putting anyone down or undermining anyone's office. And certainly you don't want to refuse an endorsement. You get a House Speaker endorsement, you get a state Senate leader endorsement, or senators, state senators, or state reps, whatever. I mean, take them. But predictive value only comes largely from former presidents, former vice presidents, governors, and mainly, honestly, because there's so many of them, House of Representatives, the delegation for the state, and the Senate, right? And by that metric, Donald Trump is so far ahead, it's not a race. When you look at the endorsements and you think about, because the only endorsements can be as predictive as polling. And so I love Kurt, my buddy Kurt Schlichter. I love Kurt, but he's going back and forth with this guy. I think his name is Dave or something. I can't remember what his real name is. We have spoken before. I'm sorry for not remembering your name, but he's going back and forth with Qantas on Twitter. And he's like, it's early. It's not early. It is not early. Primary polls are highly predictive even at this point. And the voters aren't listening to the media anymore, the parroters. Now, you know what I was thinking this morning before I get into the general election? Because the truth is, the general election margins are not that predictive this early. They're not. The leads themselves are not that predictive. But I have found over the years that there are things that are, in fact, predictive, even very early. 2-3 years in to a president's term, there's what we call, and I'll just tell you I have called them for years when we've worked on altering models and everything. We call them mood of the electorate indicators, right? You can tell where the mood of the electorate is, even though you may get a Biden +2, a Biden +6, and you'll see it in media polling all the time. You can still look inside the numbers, get it, but you can still look inside the numbers and see that the electorate, the mood of the electorate favors one candidate or another. All right. And then certain demographics certainly throw up flares like, oh boy. And when we compare them to prior cycles, we can see loud and clear where something is headed, even if one candidate isn't particularly ahead. So, that in mind, let me put up the image of the thing before I get I'll put up the interactive part of it in a second. But as we're talking about it, this is the trend in big data polling going back to August 2020. Okay. And as you remember, you may or may not remember, I don't know. I also did this on locals. All right. There was someone who had it was one of the first times I called out polling misinformation this recently. And it was somebody who was commenting on the New York Times poll and saying, this just goes to tell you everything you need to know. There are 14% undecided, and both candidates have universal name ID. And the truth is, he doesn't know how to read a cross stamp. There weren't 14% undecided. There was 4% undecided. Okay. 6% went to a third party, and another 4% said, I don't know, I may not vote. Not that I'm undecided. I don't know if I'm going to vote. All right. So it really was and that's part of a pollster's job to find out how big that is. 4%, they need to come out of the likely voter sample when they lock it up to likely voters. But the New York Times poll was a registered voter poll. All in all, it showed a 9-point shift to Donald Trump from their final poll against Joe Biden, which was Biden plus 9, to a tie, an even race with Donald Trump. Interesting enough, if you look at the YouGov poll that just came out today, and let me just make sure. Let me see. Because YouGov partners with several. They're all the same data set, which really bothers me that they do that and don't tell you that they're all the same data set, because they are. Where are you? So it is the YouGov Economist poll, one of the most pro-Democrat iterations of a YouGov data set. YouGov has Yahoo News. They have CBS, right? They have a ton of it. And then they sometimes release them on their own. They're all the same dang data sets, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a matter of who they're choosing to put in or count in that data set and how they are weighting. And I don't like it, because everyone should be told that they're all coming from the same place. So just to give you an idea before we go back to the vote trend, this is what, let me see if I can get Trump 48, DeSantis 22, Pence 5, Scott 3, Haley 3, Christie 2, Ramaswamy 2. All right. And they have Trump down by 3 because they never had Trump in the 50s. So now they have him back to the high 40s. It's kind of ridiculous. The YouGov Economist, and they're up there with the NBC, which is conducted by DeSantis's own pollster and Hillary Clinton's pollster jointly together. They are the only ones, not the only, they're in the minority and outside of the consensus that still they were the most pro DeSantis polling out there. All right. Still, when you look at the general election, you see Biden is up by 1. All right. So it was in June, it was Trump plus 4, then it was Biden plus 4, and now it's Biden plus 1, 43 to 42. So it's a 3-point shift back to Trump. Their final poll in 2020 was Biden plus 10. So that, just like the New York Times poll, is a 9-point shift back to Donald Trump. Okay, so why am I getting in all of this? The shifts matter. And what is causing the shifts matter. So let's go back to this, my graphic here. Let's go back to my handy dandy graphic so you can see it. Here is the interactive version, because I want you guys to be able to see vote levels. All right. You can see in August of 2020, there were, in fact, still quite a few undecideds, a little over 10%. All right, 10.5. And third party was still about 4%, but it had been shrinking. It was never as big as 2016 in our polling, and most others as well. It was never that big, but it was higher, 7%, 8%, then down to 6, then down to 5, then down to 3.8. It was shifting as people were deciding, and Biden was winning those people. All right, but Trump was taking the late undecideds. So that's how this was breaking off, or at least he was taking more of them at one point. The reason why Biden maintained a lead in our polling is because Biden was still farther ahead of Donald. He had a 5-point gap to close. All right. In this case, it was 45.3 to 40.5. So, I mean, if you round, it was Biden plus 4. But if you do the actual math, we like to do that. By November, right before the election, by the way, this was the Epoch Times. This was the Public Polling Project. Still big data poll, but together. The Epoch Times was like, no, I think you got it right. I mean, we're happy with this. I think you got it. So we're not going to do another one. That's our final. I'm like, all right. Even though I can't stand that. I like to have a final. I want to be able to break the undecideds. Some pollsters choose to allocate them. Some do not. Give me 1 second. I said, give me 1 second. All right. Some choose to allocate them. Some do not. And then that will be whether they do or not. That's what's in their final number. If they do, you have to remember that when you look at a pollster's final result. They are making assumptions about who is going to end up voting for who. And then, by the way, a lot of those undecideds, in our experience, they don't vote. All right. A lot of them don't vote, or at least a good significant percentage of them do not vote. In 2016, if you remember from last week, a lot of those undecideds in our final panel, because it was a daily tracking panel, we told them, you have to give us an answer. And many of them just said, Ron Johnson. And it pushed Ron Johnson's margin like 2 points higher than he actually got nationally. And it wasn't true. At the end of the day, they just didn't vote. They didn't go for Clinton, and they didn't want to vote for Trump, or vice versa, and they didn't vote. All right. And that's why Stein, we got perfect. Ron Johnson, we overestimated by like 2 points. And then, so that's what happened. That's why when our screens are very tight, because if at some point they gave us an indication they are not going to vote, they are not reliably likely voter, then we will perhaps remove them in our final result. A lot of others don't, and they just allocate. And that scares me a little bit, because I learned my lesson from 2016. All right. Anyway, by November, Biden was up 49.4 to 45.3. That was the final. So Biden plus 4.1. And only 2.9 were left undecided, which we just gave you. And 2.4 were someone else. All right. That's ballpark the way it was. Biden got 51% of the vote. Trump got 47% of the vote. So, they split the rest of the undecideds, with Trump taking just a hair more. Actually, that's what happened. Or not a hair more. He took, but when you're dealing with such small percentages at that point, it's not gonna. You're not gonna take the lead. It's not gonna happen. All right. So by September, and I had said last week it was August. I was wrong. By September 1st, 2021, and I haven't finished. There's 2 polls that I have to enter for between these periods. But by September 1st, oh no, wait a minute. It may be we didn't ask the 2024. I got to go back and check. I think I did go back and try to. We may not have asked the rematch question until September 1st. I think that's what happened. And I was wrong. And I said October 1st. And then I found one in September. I'll do a double check, but I think this is it. So by September 1st, 2021, Trump takes a lead. All right. And he leads Biden 43.2 to 39.1. Hold on. Let me just get my sheets, because there's a reason I want to talk about this. There's something I want to tell you. Where are you? There it is. Rematch. So I'm not done filling in a Google sheet yet to get the source data for all of this, but I eventually want to add annotations here, so you can not only see the margins, Trump plus Biden plus 4, Trump plus 4, not only so you can see the margins, but I want to annotate a couple things about demographics. In September of 2021, or actually, let's go in August of 2020, when Biden was still up by 4, the new voter was just about Biden plus 30. It was huge. So I am a new voter. I've never voted before. I'm going for Joe Biden by 30 points. And it was like, whoa, that's obviously helping Biden, right? By September of 2021, when Trump takes a 43.2 to 39.1 lead, the new voter flips to Trump plus 2, 42.7 to 40.9. All right. For the next 2 months, it's maintaining generally close to the same margin. Trump widens his lead in November of 2021, 44.6 to 36.5. That was being driven by people who did vote in 2020 who were saying, I voted for Joe Biden. I effed up. If it was rematched today, I would vote for Donald Trump. 1.9% of Trump's vote told us in November 1st, 2021, that they voted for Donald Trump in 2020, but would vote for Joe Biden in 2024. But 12.8% of Biden's vote said, I voted for Joe Biden, but now I would vote for Donald Trump. This goes back and forth between 8 and 12 points, roughly, for months and throughout our trend. That's the I am a voter, I'm an established voter. But for the next 2 months with new voters, in November 2021, it's Trump plus 1, 41 to 40. Basically, I'm rounding. In January of 2022, the new voter remains Trump plus 1, and it's 41 to 40. Again, 41.3 to 38.9. And then in March of 2020, and let me just give you the margins as we go. And then in March of 2022, when Trump starts to widen his support, and you can see him start to, go up a little bit, and even Biden does rise in May. And the May poll is due to, established voters again going back. But here, Trump takes a 6-point lead with new voters. And since then, it has ranged between 6 and 12 points, roughly, with established voters tightening. So, what does that mean? When it was Trump plus 8, for crying out loud, it was only Trump plus 1 with new voters. It was people having voters' remorse for Joe Biden. When, by the way, again, all the talk, if you live on Twitter, you think it's the real world, you would think Trump lost all of this support. The truth is, it's not the real world. And in real scientific polling, you can very, very clearly see, and it's not just me, the New York Times just confirmed everything I'm telling you right now. We're not exactly on the same level, folks, right? When it comes, they do good in midterms, but they blow presidential races. And if they got this race tied, even Larry Sabato from Tiny Crystal Ball said that's assuredly a Trump win. And it is, because you're looking inside in the numbers, again, and you're seeing so many different demographic shifts. And we've talked about the underclass. We've talked about Hispanics, who, by the way, are like Biden plus 3 right now. Also, the gains that Trump is making with males. We saw him make gains with Black men. And yesterday, I believe it was. Let me go back and grab this. We were talking about how high can it go, because there were all these videos people were putting around, which was hilarious. It really was. The rapper YG, he made famously the video F Trump, right? Remember F Donald Trump, the song? He's voting for Trump in 2024. All right. So I'm curious how high this can go. You had this interview that was making the rounds with a bunch of and some of them were from Baltimore, for crying out loud. Anyway, Trump won 19% of Black men in 2020. He made gains, and we could see that in the polling. That was up from 13% in 2016. Now, Black women are the more Democratic voting group. They make up, if it's 12% of the electorate, in 2016, they were 7%, and Black men were 5%. In 2020, they were 8%. And Black men were 4%. So they voted at a higher rate. Yet, still around with the Black electorate, Black voters making up 12% of the electorate. Even Black women increased for Trump. They more than doubled from 2016. In 2020, he won 9% of female Black voters compared to 4% in 2016. So we are absolutely still seeing this increase in non-white support from black men specifically, and more specifically, younger black men. So we're dealing with all of these different demographics, but the one nobody really has talked about, and by the way, that's huge. That is huge, and I'm not taking away from that, because I think they're contributing greatly to Trump doing so much better with like 30 to 44s for sure, but even the 18 to 25s or 18 to 24s, and for that matter, the 25 to 29s, I do. But what nobody and what even we haven't touched on all that much at all is the new voter. And that's the one that really hurt Donald Trump in 2020. That was a difficult, very, very difficult thing for him to overcome, even with the shenanigans. There was, you know what? I am going to play it. There is something, folks, that I didn't play from Georgia, and I think that I need to. It was one more video that I wanted to show you because, again, there's things that Trump is he's going to have to bring forward for his defense. So before we keep going with the polling, and I want to get back to the shift in younger black votes, and I think some of these new votes, they're not new registrants. Like, I'm 18 years old and I can vote for the first time. He's doing better with that group, but that's not what it is. These are like the working class millennials and Generation Xers that Barnes and I have been watching like a hawk with, our little scope, because we could see something happening. And many of them just don't participate in the process. They're very disconnected from society. It's complicated. But then there's also a totally different group. Why is Trump doing so much better with disabled voters? And when I overlapped a couple of these surveys, I'm looking at it. Some of these I'm disabled, I'm not working, and then I've quit looking. Like, those are usually Democratic groups, and Trump has tightened and or taken some leads in some polls with these groups. I'm like, why is that? They're first-time voters. They're saying, I'm going to vote this time. Normally, I don't care about anything. I don't participate in the political process, but I'm going to now. And I know it's risky for Trump, but when candidates can pull that off, you get Barack Obama. Hell, even, look, I know I totally agree with you that that 2020 was not on the up and up. I'm sure that most of you believe that, and I'm with you on it. I am 100%. However, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't ignore some of the lessons that can be learned, because you are going to have to beat the cheat Republicans. So don't just, and by the way, Democrats would love nothing more than for you to get disillusioned, for you to lose heart, to lose faith. Now, all these indictments that are rolling down, how could we do this? How could we possibly beat this? The Mexican people beat it. The people in South Africa beat it. Now they want to slaughter all the white people, but Benjamin Netanyahu beat it. There are countless other examples. You may not like them if you're a right winger, but Lula beat it. You beat it by ramming it down their throat. That's how you do it. Candidates have won from jail. The system had no choice but to give in. They had no choice after that. So the population, we have no more regime credibility. And I do think Cernovich is right that they've given up on credibility. And now they're just going with raw power. Well, that's happened before. There's only one way to face it. You can't take the replacement that they give you. I'm sorry, I'm not advocating for a candidate here. I'm talking about history. You can't do it because that's a cave. That's a win for them. It's still a win. They'll get their chilling effect. You will no longer get a true believer. People who are strong enough in their position, character, financial situation, who don't need the rent seekers, who can get through with the support of the people. They won't do it anymore, folks. Nobody is going to put themselves forward at the threat of prosecution, because Tim Pool's right. This is a way that, first of all, they are trying to teach us a lesson, and Tim Pool is right. They're going to keep going down that chain, and because they want you to lose heart. They're gonna arrest your favorite media personality. They're gonna come after people that you won't believe. They may arrest your grandmother. I'm not kidding. And they're trying to get you to lose faith and to lose your will. And that's going to be what this comes down to. There's a moment, though, that there was a moment on Newsmax the other day that look, Laura just texted me something. Absolute power monarchs once held. Absolute authority. They don't hold it anymore. The power really is with the body of the people. It is with the sovereign. You are the sovereign. You just are not exercising your power. All right, so let's look at this. Ken Paxton was why did you just remove that? Okay. Ken Paxton was on Newsmax. All right. Let me just read this. So the witch hunt continues. 19 people indicted tonight, including the former president of the United States, me, by an out of control and very corrupt district attorney who campaigned and raised money on I will get Trump. It's just totally outrageous. Could you imagine if some right-wing bomb thrower district attorney went after Barack Obama and threw Obama in jail? And by the way, there absolutely are things they could do. Even now, there are Republicans who have law enforcement authority over jurisdictions where the Bidens committed crimes. If a right-wing bomb thrower threw Obama in jail for sedition, he and Joe Biden planted the seed. Joe Biden's idea, and he spoke it right to Barack Obama. It's in the White House records. To use the Logan Act to try to trick Mike Flynn. Obama absolutely allowed Crossfire Hurricane, knowing full well those FISA warrants were illegal. Presidents okay that stuff. There is no way Barack Obama did not know. And now we know he knew anyway. The White House records show the meetings with him, with Comey, with Andrew McCabe. The text messages from FBI and Justice Department employees clearly address, speak to, acknowledge, talk about the meetings with the president. So imagine if some right-wing attorney general had Barack Obama arrested right now, which, by the way, they absolutely should do. They shouldn't. The Republicans are. I loathe this party, folks, more than I think I've loathed any party in the history of any country. I really do. Why? Because this is America. This is supposed to be it. This is the last resort of people who have dealt with this stuff in the past. There's nowhere else to run or hide. There's nowhere else to go. They should be literally fighting to the death, tooth and nail. Now, why is Harriet Hageman the only one who says this for what it is? This is sedition. They project onto you everything they're doing. Jesus, Laura, you've been on that for 20 years. Laura had said that because, like, you have to understand, I spent a lot of time in academia, so I'm like looking at these people still like they're rational humans, and I'm like, nah, Laura, it's just their life experience, and they don't see things the way other people see things. You and I come from we have a different life experience. We come from working class. We're born with a silver spoon in our mouth. And she's like, no, Rich, they're mentally unwell. They project, like, psychiatrists have studied this before. They are projecting their own guilt onto others, and she 20 years she's been saying.
And that is why they are so intimate and knowledgeable about what they are
what it is they're accusing you of.
Yes.
Yeah. So true. So true. All right, let's play this by Ken Paxton because, oops, sorry, Laura. This is something that this prosecution stepping on Jack Smith's toes. You heard Barnes last night. It was a great bourbon with Barnes last night, and he said, 85%, this case will be eventually addressed by a higher court. It will get, Trump's lawyers could ask a federal judge to supersede it, and it will get right because it's essentially right. I mean, they're just trying to use the Georgia RICO statute, and it's crazy. So let's go ahead and run it because what the I think I don't want to say this because the federal courts would make it more difficult for Donald Trump to defend himself. Okay, in Georgia, they absolutely are opening a door here, and Ken Paxton reflected back on this because I remember when Ken filed this lawsuit, and the fact of the matter remains. Well, I'll address it after he's done. Let's roll with it, and then I'll address what he's saying.
For more, let's bring in Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who led the biggest effort to hold states accountable after some didn't comport with their election laws. Mr. Attorney General, welcome back. What is your initial reaction to the latest indictment against President Trump?
Just looks like exactly what President Trump said. It's a witch hunt. This is obviously the fourth indictment. It's so obvious what's going on. It's completely political. And the idea that questioning election results, which had obviously a lot of problems, and I know from dealing with this in Texas, Georgia didn't have signature verification. They had mail-in ballots, by the millions that weren't authorized by state law, and they had these drop boxes which were unsecure. And supposedly asking questions and challenging that is a crime. We've come a long way in America.
Yeah, well, indeed. So, Mr. Attorney General, Georgia was mentioned in your lawsuit after the 2020 election. Now, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a constitutional scholar, but I've been looking everywhere for the Stacey Abrams' butthurt provision that would allow Governor Brian Kemp to sign that consent decree that seemed by some legal analysts to have violated Georgia election law. Is there such a provision in the Constitution that you're aware of, sir?
No, look. What they did was wrong. They are required to follow their own state laws. We're required to follow our state laws. Georgia did not do that. And I can't imagine by some consent decree of the governor, you can just agree that what was passed by the legislature, that the governor can override that with consent decree. We certainly didn't think he could do that. And clearly that affected the election, the presidential election across the nation, and it affected my constituents.
All right, bottom line. This was, I thought, I'm not a lawyer, but one of the stronger lawsuits that Ken Paxton had, or anyone really had. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what Brian Kemp says, no matter what any other hack Republican says, the states around the country decided that what they did was unconstitutional. And much of it has since been ruled unconstitutional. They decided to basically forsake the legislature, abandon the legislature, no longer acknowledge that not only the federal, but all of their state constitutions allocate the power to conduct to implement election laws, to enact election laws and procedures. That is through the legislature. The governor simply signs and then must enforce. What Brian Kemp did was allow local authorities, mostly in blue areas and in rhino areas, to change their procedures, which then everyone else had to do, to abandon verification procedures on signature verification, to abandon bans on ballot harvesting, which, by the way, in many of the states, bans on ballot harvesting, the way that the words are written, you could actually look to drop boxes as part of that. Like that would be outlawed as well because it's a third party handling of ballots. They decided the legislature's sovereignty was no longer valid. They changed the nature of government, and by decree, Brian Kemp stamped it. That's what he did. Jocelyn Benson in Michigan has been ruled since, was not allowed to change absentee ballot laws on her own, was not allowed to change verification standards on her own. You have to give the weight of when you're matching, according to Michigan law, you have to look at the signatures at the time. And you have to look at the signatures, excuse me, hiccups. and you have to have a strict standard. When Jocelyn Benson just decided, the Secretary of State, by decree, which of course was not going to be challenged by Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, that you give the benefit of the doubt to the signature. That is not the way elections are conducted in this country. And not in most of the states. They all give they don't give the signature the benefit of the doubt. If it does not match, does not match. And in many states, voters have a chance of curing period. So you have to be contacted. Your signature did not match. But let's be honest, folks. So many did not match, according to a Democratic expert in Arizona, Maricopa County, for instance. Looking at a small sample, he said 12%, at least, they don't match. The resources involved to call 12% and have them cure those. That's why in most cases they don't. They just chuck them. That's why Gwinnett County in 2016 chucked over almost like 12.5 or 12.6% of their signatures. The truth is they don't have the resources for that. The truth is most of these states that did this did not have the resources to implement an election with those vast, significant changes in such a short period of time. Folks, when has government ever done anything efficiently in 60 or 90 days? Never. Never. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, they weren't even early voting states. Absentee ballot voting never caught on. They were election day states. Also, local election officials decided, and they just took it upon themselves in the state of Wisconsin, to expand who is and who isn't eligible to declare indefinitely confined status. You are not allowed to declare indefinitely confined status because you have a sniffle. Yet that's what they did. Hundreds of thousands of ballots that are ineligible for indefinitely confined, about 200,000, 187,000, I believe. A special counsel, a former judge, investigated that. What did he find? Right. So no matter what Brian Kemp and others say, they cannot argue with the fact that they took it upon themselves to unilaterally change laws that they had no authority to change. That's why we saw 81 million votes. That's why we saw the only president in U.S. history to add votes to his margin and still lose. Let's get real. And no, Brian, we never saw the images. You never did what you promised to do. And no, Jocelyn never sent the absentee ballot affidavits to anyone who requested them, even though she's supposed to keep them on file for 2 years at least after an election. Maybe those signatures wouldn't have matched. I mean, that's signed under penalty of perjury. So how did those change of address flags get those ballots? It could be on the up and up. It could totally, absolutely could be on the up and up. Can I see the absentee ballot affidavits? Just ignore requests. And when fraud investigators who are hired, this is what they do for a living. They do it for, they're good enough to do it for Wells Fargo. They're good enough to do it for Bank of America. All these Fortune 500 companies who bring in these people to do these investigations. They're good enough to do it for them, but after they realized, after that Secretary of State's office caught wind of that, they stopped answering phone calls. They stopped responding. Why? If you won, this is something that always really just defies logic. If you believe that you won an election legitimately, why would you not, or why would you fight any attempt to validate your victory? I don't remember the Trump campaign, because they didn't, or anyone on the right, because they didn't, object to Jill Stein and then Hillary Clinton jumped on Jill Stein's bandwagon to look at those ballots in Michigan. The left objected after that recount started to show something very similar to what we just saw Tucker look at in Georgia. The tallies weren't matching the recorded counts. They weren't in Michigan, in Wayne County. So Hillary Clinton was like, Jill, shut up, stop. And they abandoned the recount in Michigan. They abandoned it. The right had no problem. They were like, we know Donald Trump won. Go ahead, look all you want. If you believe those signatures match, let's see them. You would want people to see them. But instead, if you're somebody who's not sure of that and you're thinking, historically, Fulton County rejects like 7%. What they reject this year? We're only talking about a vote margin of 2,000 votes. We can't afford to do that. Ditto Wisconsin. Ditto Arizona. Ditto everywhere. Nevada had a ban on ballot harvesting, which are all popular, by the way. In these states we're talking about, voters don't support ballot harvesting or drop boxes at all. We've polled like every state, including the state of Virginia. In our final 2021 Virginia poll, Youngkin +2 nailed it. Not only nailed the margin, nailed exactly what the electorate would look like. Voters told us the witness process is dumb with signatures. There needs to be a verification procedure. This is not credible. It's not a credible system because that's what Virginia has. They don't even have a traditional signature verification. And also, we don't like drop boxes. We want bans on drop boxes. In Georgia, let's pull up Georgia. And this is the back end. I'm just going to show you because the back end is bigger than the front end. So it's like what I see when I sign into EverViz. And we are moving everything to Data Wrapper. I'm just too damn busy. I'm not done yet. We asked from table 9 to table 13 in general, do you support or oppose each of the following election integrity laws and policies, or are you unsure? And then in table 15, do you support or oppose a full forensic audit of the vote in the 2020 presidential election in Georgia? Okay. Here is photo identification, 80.3%. And again, we said, in general, do you support or oppose each of the following election integrity laws and procedures or policies, or are you unsure? And then we said, requiring all voters to provide photo identification to cast a vote. 80.3% support, 10.7% oppose, 9% unsure. I mean, it's friggin' yes plus 69. Signature verification. Again, in general, do you support or oppose each of the following? Signature verification, or the matching of voter signatures to driver's licenses or an official voter registration card. Support, 77.9, 78%. Oppose, 13.7, unsure, 8.3. Bans on ballot harvesting or drop boxes, the practice of allowing non-government third parties to collect and deliver ballots not belonging to them. Ban drop boxes, 58.2%. 27.9% oppose it. That's it. 13.9% were unsure. Election day deadlines for vote totals. Election day deadlines for officials to report the total number of votes cast in their precincts and counties to prevent suspicion surrounding late arriving ballots. So no more of this crap from Fulton County. I got 600,000 votes. Okay, let's write it up. Then on Thursday, oops, we found another 50,000. Then on Friday, darning shucks, then another 35. No more of that. 69.8% of voters in Georgia wanted what Florida has. This is what Florida has. And it's not just total votes. How many absentee ballots do you have returned by the deadline? 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Thank you. You're required by law to report that. If you don't, you could end up like Brenda Snipes, which is what happened. How many in-person early votes did you tally before Tuesday? There are no more added after that. And then finally, the only thing that should really be in question is how many election day votes do you have? And that you won't know until they're counted up. And in many cases, that's not even true because they have counters. So you would know it immediately, like in Florida. These states are you-know-what shows. Arizona, Georgia, they're you-know-what shows. Even North Carolina, which has more opportunity to exploit, still conducted their election better than these people for a reason. First of all, North Carolina Republicans fight. They fight, Laura, right? They fight. So do Florida Republicans. They fight tooth and nail. Texas, take Ken Paxton off and nobody fights, except for Lieutenant Governor Dan. He fights. John O'Shea, if you elect him to Texas 12 over Kay Granger, he'll fight. But he's got to be elected. You got to get him there. These people in Georgia, Daniel Street and Mike Davis were on the show a few weeks ago. What did they tell you? The weakest Republican or the weakest political force in this country is a Southern male Republican. They are the biggest cowards. And again, they're the biggest cowards, they're the biggest crooks, and they are not smart. The Brian Kemps of the world. The Brad Raffenspergers of the world. And if you were listening to Bourbon with Barnes last night, you heard all about how could Trump's lawyers have been the lawyers for Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. It was a total conflict of interest. But that's how you rig things. That's how you rig proceedings. Brad Raffensperger has no interest in proving that he conducted an illegitimate election. So how on earth could you have the same lawyers? Allowance of poll watchers and observers to conduct oversight during the counting of ballots. 71.7% of voters in Georgia said that they want people, observers, in there with the poll workers watching what they're doing. So Mrs. Yellow Shirt that was just on the Tucker clip we played would have gotten caught before she scanned that ballot multiple times. Forensic audit of the 2020 election. 59.3% of voters in Georgia told us they want someone else to come in and do a full audit. Only 28.4% opposed it. 12.4% were unsure. And you remember Kemp was like, yeah, you know what? Remember him flip-flopping? Yeah, you know what? We got to do it. I got to tell you a little story. I don't know if it's true or not. Tragedy struck the Kemp family, and then he flip-flopped. At first, he was like, no, it's legit. And then evidence came out, and he was like, and then there were all these affidavits, which is something he just lied again on Twitter about. There's nobody who's ever come forward and put under oath. And then he said, in a court of law. Because he knows damn well there have been people who were put forward. And an affidavit is being put under oath. You are signing that affidavit under penalty of perjury. You are saying, I know that I'm committing a felony if I lie. A felony if I lie here. He's full of crap. There was nobody who did that. It's not totally unreal. It's a total scam. A total scam. And by the way, before we go, because I know we're about to go here soon, I didn't change anything. Just so you all know what I'm talking about. You have Virginia. Where was the one that was the latest? Virginia. That's I just want to make sure the one that I got, that's public school. Here's election integrity. Let me open that one and see if that's right. If it is, then I'll change it because there's two of them. We did two. They're very, very similar. I mean, we asked one for locals. We asked Virginia voters. Oops. Oh, you know what? Ooh, I got to stop sharing that for a second. We asked Virginia voters for locals poll, and we asked them for a poll we did for CD Media, which again, Todd, you got the most accurate poll, bro. You got lucky, brother. You didn't get lucky. You were smart. You hired me. So both one was just a little bit closer. Let me see. This one was gubernatorial election locals poll final. So actually, this is not the right one. The one I opened in a separate tab is the right one because again, they're very close, but you can see here, gubernatorial election locals poll final. Or can you? Or am I showing you it? Nope. It's in caption in the bottom. I know it's small. All right. This is it right here. So that's how I know. Same ordering of the questions. In general, do you support or oppose each of the following? Photo identification was 82.4%. Signature verification was 71.2%. Again, remember, this is a state that doesn't have a traditional signature verification. In Virginia, 61% of voters wanted a ban on drop boxes and ballot harvesting. 61%. In the Old Dominion, which is really the new Dominion now, election day deadline, 73%, and poll watchers scored way high, 78%, which you got to give the Virginia Project. I believe it's a Virginia Project. Did you not let me show them that, or did you click off? Okay, let me just show it again real quick. 78% for poll watchers to conduct oversight. Election day deadline, 73. Ballot harvesting, 61. I mean, just overwhelming majorities. Overwhelming majorities. And that's the state of Virginia, for crying out loud. And how do I know I'm right? Youngkin +2. So if I was right, dead on, about that, I'm very clearly right about the sentiment that voters have on these issues and these procedures. So again, total scam. I didn't again get a time to talk about the national poll. We'll do that more on Friday. We may have a guest on Friday. I think we will. So we'll do that, and then we'll do the talk about the national poll, which we're going to get cranked up here. We're ready to rock on it. All right. With that in mind, a lot of comments. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers, folks. Thanks for growing the audience. Don't forget to sign up on Locals, peoplespundit.locals.com, peoplespundit.locals.com. All right. You would have gotten a lot of this stuff already in a lot more detail and ahead of time. Especially there's commentary about the presidential vote trend that I think, people who are supporters on Locals can read it. If you haven't yet and you are a supporter, go check it out. If you're not a supporter, and why aren't you a supporter? Get on the bandwagon. Come on now. Also, don't forget publicly funded public opinion. I do want to start the poll this weekend. We're not quite there. We're just under 70%. So the link is in the description, bigdatapoll.com/public/ or polling project. Just look in the description. And you know what, Laura, let's throw it in the comments for me. I'll give it to you. Throw it in the comments for me and pass her around. Also, share that far and wide because we've greatly expanded our contributor base, which takes a lot of burden off of the people who have been crowdfunders from the beginning. And that's awesome because, like I said, our audience is it's growing so quickly. If everyone gave $1 every month, we would easily be able to poll every month. All right. With that in mind, we'll see you on Wednesday. And I'll have some probably announcements. Great conversation with the Wayne Dupree show yesterday. If you missed it, go check it out. It's been a while since I was on with my brother from another mother. Man, I love Wayne. I miss being on that show. And I'm going to be on his radio program, I think, this Sunday. All right. Well, I think we're going to be able to figure it out. Which is the Baltimore, Maryland area. Right. And of course, Poso, the interview with Poso yesterday was also great. So don't forget to go check them out if you haven't already. Then we'll give you updates on more stuff to come. All right. I think that's it. I think that it's time for the cueing of the music. And we'll see you all on Friday. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers, folks.
Deuces.